As a kid at about 7 or 8 years old, I was into quite a few cartoons, but at the very top of the list was one particular cartoon that literally kicked the arse of my parents' wallet, and that was none other than
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, heroes in a half shell, turtle power.
Sorry, did I say cartoon? What I actually meant to say was everything. Action figures, clothing, comics, bed covers. Oh my god, look, they're making a movie. Check out this LCD game. Look at it. Well, if you think that's cool, haha, you ain't heard nothing yet. What about skateboards, birthday cake, board games, pizza, shoes, backpacks, fanny packs, trading cards, and of course, video games?
Shut up and take my money!
Yes, that's me, holding what I thought was the same game as my neighbours. Somehow I actually continued to believe that too. Anyway, I think it's safe to say that I wasn't alone during the great turtle takeover of the 1990s. Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael and Leonardo, these guys took over my life. And sure, this will never be beaten by this, but I can't deny it brings me great joy to know that my little boy is growing up in a world where the Ninja Turtles are not just some random 90s fad, they still matter. However, with every new sensation, it's only a matter of time before the copycats roll in. Oh dear. I'm sorry to say guys, but none of you hold a candle to the Ninja Turtles. But with that said, if you look at this as a bad thing, you may actually miss out, as sometimes getting inspiration from one media sensation can actually create something quite unique and cool. Not Turtles cool, and as a kid I wouldn't touch cartoons like Bucky O'Hare and Biker Mice from Mars with a barge pole, due to the obvious copycat infringement to my younger minded self. But there was one particular franchise that really did entice me. Copycat or not. It was about this time that Battletoads made its way onto my line of sight. Yep, this was very interesting. The Battletoads are without a doubt the best of a mixed bunch of turtle copycats in my eyes, and for some reason I've always given these guys a slimy green card when it comes to the likeness of my favourite kids TV show. Why? Because the games, as well as the designs, are brilliant, for the most part. So, join me, Rash, Zitz, Pimple and Professor T-Bird, as we take an in-depth new age look into the Battletoads franchise, to not only look at the games, but the people behind them, the studio behind them, and the obvious inspiration. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. Produced by Rare, yes, that's Rare, Battletoads has gained a sort of legendary status from gamers all over the world during its fairly short lifespan. 5 games spread over 4 years, the Amphibians, as they were almost named, really have left a lasting impression with the slightly edgier and darker tone than what was on the market at the time. Very similar in my opinion to the fantastic Earthworm Jim series. Excellent, although hard as balls gameplay, brilliant graphics, and well, we really have only scratched the tip of the iceberg. So, before looking at the games, I think we're in fact getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, let's go back to the beginning. Here we are, back before Xbox owned Rare, and heck, why not go back before Nintendo did too? Back when there wasn't even a company called Rare, and instead you have Ashby Computers and Graphics Limited, better known by their trade name, Ultimate Play the Game. Although only really known by the retro gaming community nowadays, back then this company was a force to be reckoned with, and in short they produced some of the most memorable home computer games of the mid-80s, with such games as the Jetpack games, the Sabre Wolf games, and the previously mentioned game changer, Night Lore. Honestly, if I was going to talk about how important this company was in full, it would take me a serious amount of time. In fact, it would probably take me exactly 37 minutes and 48 seconds before we get to Battletoads. So I'm going to jump straight into the important part and advise you check out Kim Justice's video to find out more on this topic. As I already mentioned, Ultimate had been producing games, brilliant games, for the ZX Spectrum home computer primarily. And although I've mentioned this beast many times on my channel, which primarily has an American audience, this system saw most of its popularity in the UK. So the company tried to find more worldwide systems to produce games for. And after looking worldwide for what they thought would be the next big thing, the company imported this little machine. The Famicom. So with their new red and yellow console in hand, the team went ahead and started to reverse engineer the console under the subdivision of the Ultimate company name, Rare. This was damn impressive. The company had no documentation or contact with Nintendo and still was fully able to suss out how to make games for the system, probably better than most of Nintendo's first party studios due to knowing the system inside out. Quite literally. Because of this, the company sold the Ultimate side of the business to US Gold, stopped making ZX Spectrum games, and instead made several tech demos for the Famicom and showed them off to Nintendo. Nintendo liked what they saw so much that they gave them an unlimited budget to make games for their system, which is exactly what they did. But with all that money, they didn't just make one, they went crazy. And within a few years, leading into the early to mid 90s, the company went ahead working on over 60 games for the Famicom, now more known as the NES. Yes, that's what we call it in the UK. And obviously in 1991, the company produced the first game that we'll be talking about today, simply titled Battletoads. Here it is, the original, a game known by many as being extremely difficult, but they really shouldn't be put off. Battletoads, even with its difficulty, is one of the most rewarding side-scrollers for the NES due to the game's excellent learning curve. Yes, you're gonna die over and over and over again, but you will learn to get better at the game over and over and over again. Now, although this game may look like yet another side-scroller, which I'm worried that I'm starting to get a bit of a fanboy reputation for, it obviously is a lot of fun. Not only does it have a pretty cool, almost unique style about it with the characters' inflamed body parts, but thankfully the game actually changes up its playstyle quite often, making you, the player, get really excited for what's coming up next. Dodge enemies firing at you from their first-person perspective, hang from ropes and kick everything you see in the face. Take the infamous crash course, which is almost too fast, go surfing, and probably best of all, drop the hardcore beat 'em up for some classic 2D platforming that will truly test your skills. And do all of this whilst listening to some of the best 8-bit chiptune music that the system has to offer. Battletoads is gonna keep you on your toes. The developers have actually gone on record to say that they've made the game purposely hard so that buyers would actually get some lengthy playtime from it. So, with that in mind, should you get it? Well, if you like 2D scrolling beat-em-ups that are also 2-player by the way, it's a no-brainer. But don't just get this to sit on your shelf collector style, get it and actually put the time in. You will struggle to find a similar game for the 8-bit generation that is as rewarding as this one. Otherwise, you could actually get the Famicom version, which strangely enough is actually easier than the UK and US release. But let's face it, if you do that, you're not playing the game as it was originally intended, and everyone you tell will secretly judge you. Now, if you ask me, the best version is the one that I owned for the Sega Genesis. Yes, the Sega Genesis, No idea why I had the American version, but hey, I did. And this was when I first discovered the name change for the system. Anyway, this version was ported by Arc Systems, and although many say it's slightly easier than the NES port, sadly I've not played that version enough to know. It is a pretty impressive port, slightly better graphics, redrawn sprite work, and a Genesis remix sound of the already brilliant NES soundtrack. Again, this is my go-to version to choose from, but let's face it, that's no doubt due to nostalgia, which for this game I have a lot of. Because even with the game's difficulty, I was actually able to beat this one without using a Game Genie back in the day. I'm looking at you, classic Game Room. Arc Systems also produced the Game Gear version, which, in short, is the version you want to avoid. Cut down levels, missing levels, and tailored gameplay, which in most parts makes the game easier, but also quite frustrating, due to the horrible hit detection, which weirdly only seems to affect certain enemies, even if they're of the same type. There was also a Master System port being worked on, which, let's face it, is going to be this again, but thankfully it never saw the light of day. Either way, the original game worked out really well, and even with the difficulty, the reviews were incredibly favourable, with the games getting ported again by Mindscape to the Amiga and Amiga CD32. These are good ports, just not as good. Still worth getting though, even if only for the awesome intro. So that's enough about Battletoads. What's next? Well, we still have the Game Boy version. But before we look at that, let's take a look at this, which strangely enough is a port of those original games. And this is something completely different. So we'll get to that one in a minute. Don't worry, I'll keep it short. Battletoads in Ragnaroks World, despite having a pretty big following in the metal cover community on YouTube, is pretty much what you would expect. It's okay. There is nothing overly offensive about it, but like so many games in my Complete History series, it's really nothing more than a watered down port with wonkier controls, a pretty damn abysmal hit detection, and only 7 levels over the original 12. I've said it many times before on my show, when it comes to these sort of games, you might as well play the original. So, let's move on to that Battletoads game for the Game Boy. This time, other than the story which is slightly changed, resulting in you only being able to play as Zitz, the game itself is actually a pretty solid port of the original. It most definitely does play differently, and has been heavily modified to work on such a limited system, but it still does play really well in my opinion. I was very much expecting this to be a quick pick up and even more quickly put back down sort of game. But I was pleasantly surprised. One of the biggest changes is most definitely the lack of platforming in this version. But either way, it is still great fun to try. And hey, if you're a fan of the franchise, or at least like the look of what you've seen so far, then I don't think you're going to be wasting your time here.
Just video game review! Okay, last week Harley and I reviewed Ultra Enviroman. Whack to the curb. It has got to go. So today, we're gonna take a look at Battletoads. Rocket! That it is, I mean, they got Psycho Pigs and Turbo Thwacking. And with kick fighting, surfing, babe saving, how can you go wrong? Your kid's a freak for Battletoads and these other games from TradeWest, Nintendo Entertainment, or Game Boy systems required.
2 years after that original, Rare decided it was time to release a sequel to the series that was becoming more and more popular with every port. And no, I'm not talking about the Tiger LCD game. In 1993, we got the almost Nintendo exclusive Battletoads in Battle Maniacs for the Super Nintendo, or just Battle Maniacs as it was known in Japan and on the Master System. Now looking at the original SNES game, I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed. It is still a great game, but sadly it's just not as good as the original, and for sequel's sake, you just always want to be better. For me, Battle Maniacs is just a newer version of the original game. Again, sure it's pretty, but nothing feels that new here. But with all that said, if you do just want more of the same, relentlessly hard Battletoads that is, well, then you've got it here. The 2-player game mode returns, this time giving you the option to hit each other or not, which is a nice addition due to the character sprites being so goddamn big. The music is a great step forward for the series, and overall, you have a game that is fully worth checking out. Sadly, however, the Master System Tech Toy release doesn't hold up as well. But come on, that's to be expected. In regards to the story of the game, it's actually mostly taken from the Battletoads comic found in Nintendo Power magazine, which became so popular that even had a go at turning it into an animated show. As you would have guessed, other than the quite rare to find VHS tape, only one episode was ever produced, and it was an absolute failure. During all this hype of cartoons, comics and games, toys were obviously, I wouldn't say flying off the shelves. This was the height of the Ninja Turtles after all. But they did do well, as did the Double Dragon toys and games. And well, haha, you know what's coming next. Battletoads Double Dragon came out of nowhere and was one of those crazy crossovers you never expected to happen. But it did. Fusing together the zany Battletoads universe with the more adult martial arts game, the end result is quite a bit of fun. And for all of you that already know the deal, as I mentioned it briefly in my Double Dragon episode, this is a Battletoads game through and through, and Technos, the guys behind the Double Dragon series, gave Rare the rights to use the characters but had no input in the final game. And fair enough, it wasn't long before this that Super Double Dragon was released. Now Rare obviously wanted this to be more than just a Battletoads game with Bimmy and Jimmy involved, and what you end up with is a game that is far more chilled out than the previous games in the series, and instead it's far more like a generic beat 'em up. See this as a bad thing all you want, but in my opinion it's a much needed breath of fresh air for the series, and I would personally always choose to play this game over Battle Maniacs. The game was available for 4 systems from the get-go, and thankfully they were all developed by Rare, resulting in an excellent experience no matter what version you decided to load up. Well, apart from the Game Boy version. That one is just okay. Again, enjoyment can be found if you go looking for it, but all in all, it's just a downgraded version of the NES original. And yes, the NES also got a port. A bloody awesome one at that. For me, it's crazy to see this game running on the system, and Rare had obviously pushed it to its absolute limits, resulting in one of the best looking games for the NES. The Mega Drive port comes quite close, albeit of a far greater soundtrack in my eyes, and the SNES port, which is the version most people remember playing, is also great, with a lot more of that Mode 7 in place during the game's boot up. Either way, no matter what version you're going to get, as long as you practice, you're in for a fun night. Which brings me to the 5th and final game in the series, simply titled Battletoads, for the arcade or Super Battletoads in Japan. The way I see it, if Rare had unlimited power when they first started dabbling with this game back on the NES 3 years earlier, this is what they would have made. Battletoads Arcade is a fantastic send-off for the series, and with its recent jump into the Xbox One's Rare Replay collection, there is no reason for you not to get this game. This is such a great game. Besides the original, this is probably the best in the series, and without a doubt the easiest to pick up and play. Firstly, the game is gorgeous to look at, extremely high quality sprites put together by Rare and arcade collaborator Electronic Arts. Humour and graphics are all a lot darker in this version thanks to not having to abide by the rules of the Big N, and the developers obviously went as crazy as they saw fit, even including an obvious rip-off car smashing stage that originated in Final Fight. However, with all this said, the game is still relentlessly hard, and even has a final boss that was purposely made to be so difficult it would make the player pump in more dosh even if he or she thinks they are inflicting damage, which at first, you're not. Now with Microsoft owning the rights to the aptly named amphibians, they have teased on several occasions how they would like to bring it back, so much so that at every E3 the rumour mill always comes out that a new game is in development. One day I believe we will see a 6th entry into the already brilliant for the most part series. But until then, we have plenty to keep us going with the 5 released so far. Although, a 6th game did almost make it. Not much is known about the Game Boy Advance version, except it was happening. Thankfully, it didn't, because if these horrendous screenshots and video footage here are anything to go by, it was gonna be crap anyway. What wasn't crap, however, was the hidden boss in Shovel Knight, exclusively for the Xbox version of the game. And being able to play as Rash in Killer Instinct, well, that's just a brilliant homage to the series. And there you have it, guys, the complete history of Battletoads. At first glance, a cheap imitation, and when it comes to the toys and animation, yeah, I'll give you that one. But in regards to the games, well, I think we have a few worthy contenders in this series. A fantastic series of games for the most part, that gamers have been begging for that 6th game ever since Phil Spencer teased the world with his Battletoads t-shirt. Come on, Microsoft, make this complete history defunct and release a new game. Honestly, I'm cool with that. When E3 comes round, you know what to do. Show the fans that you're in touch with your studio's roots and make that 6th game happen. But until then, why not pick up Pimple, play with your Rash and get your teeth stuck into some Zitz in the often overlooked but never forgotten Battletoads series. A big thanks to all of my Patreons who help make these episodes a reality, with a special shout out going to Ted Kimmel, Ryan Burford, Ian A. Chapman, Phil Lowlins, Team Not Crash, Casey Garner, Blitz Hedgie, Gavin Guriveyes, Ben Hall, Taylor Olmond and Tiago Pera dos Santos. If you want to become a patron, then check the links that you see on the screen. If you haven't subscribed already, there's a link for that too, and if you want to check out previous complete history videos and random history videos, well, there's even links for those. But for now, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.